Hello and welcome to another video from Mr. Kumado. In this video, we are going to derive the quadratic formula over here. General quadratic equation is written of the form as squared plus bs plus c equal to 0, where a, b, and c are constants. So we are going to use the method of completing of squares to derive the quadratic formula. So we divide through the equation by I, which is the coefficient of x squared. So dividing through by a, we get x squared plus b over a, x because we've divided this by a to get that, plus c over a because that's also been divided by a, equals 0 divided by a is still going to be 0. By the method of completing of squares, we look at the coefficient of x, which is b over a, and we divide that by 2. So dividing b over a by 2, we get b over 2a. So we have x plus b over 2a in a bracket squared. Now if we expand this, we get x plus b over 2a in a bracket squared will give us x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared. If we compare this with the term over here, we notice there's an extra term, which is the b squared over 4i. So we need to subtract from here the b squared over 4a squared. And we usually will write this b over 2a in a bracket squared. This is the same thing as b squared over 4a squared. And in the quadratic equation itself, we have plus c over I equals 0. So we have x plus b over 2a in a bracket squared minus squaring this gives us b squared over 4a squared plus c over a equals 0. Here we have a denominator of 4a squared, and here we have a denominator of just I. So what we tend to do now is we want to make the denominators the same. So we must have to times here in this denominator by 4a to make it 4a squared. We also times the numerator by the same 4a. So we're going to go on here to show the rest of what we've got. X plus b over 2i in a bracket squared minus b squared over 4a squared. Because we times here by 4a squared and the denominator by 4a squared, we get plus 4ac over 4a squared equals to 0. At this point, we can see that these denominators are the same, so we can combine these two fractions here. X plus b over 2a in a bracket squared minus b squared plus 4ac all over 4a squared equals 0. We want to make x the subject, so all of this bit we're going to take to the right hand side. So we'll be left with x plus b over 2a in a bracket squared equals, you notice this minus sign only affects the b squared, does not affect the 4ac. So if we take this fraction to the right hand side, the b squared becomes a positive b squared and a plus 4ac becomes a negative 4ac. The denominator stays the same as 4a squared. Because we want to make x the subject, we need to take square root of both sides. So square root here and square root here. So from here, this square will cross out with the square root, and that gives us x plus b over 2a equals, this is a fraction, this square root is square root of the whole fraction here. So we can take the square root of the numerator, which is b squared minus 4ac square root. And the denominator will also be square root of 4a squared. Then this gives us b squared minus 4ac square root over square root of 4 is 2, square root of a squared is a, so we get a denominator of 2i. But when we take the square root of a number, we get either two numbers as the square root, one positive, one negative, or we get 0, depending if we're taking the square root of 0. So from here, we are left with x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus square root, because the square root will give us a positive value or a negative value, b squared minus 4ac over 2a. We're going to carry on here for the final solution to the quadratic. We have x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This plus or minus is here to show that we're taking the positive value of the square root and we work out our answer for x. And then we take the negative value of the square root and we work out the other answer for x. So all we have to do now is to subtract b over 2 squared from both sides of the equation. If we subtract b over 2a from here, we then left with x equals minus b over 2i, because we subtract b over 2a from here and we subtract from here as well. Then we have our plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac also over 2a. Now these two fractions, they have the same denominators of 2a, so we can combine them easily to have x equals minus b plus or minus. We're writing all this over the same denominator, so square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And this is what we call the quadratic formula.